Welcome to the Chattabox with your host, Nicole Parchini. This episode is kind of a riff off of a blog post that I wrote not too long ago called Make It Make Sense. And so when I wrote this piece, I wrote it primarily because I felt like when I was a lot younger, I was always very curious about the world. The world fascinates me. I'm very, interested in why humans live the way that we do and just how our world works and why does it work the way that it works and why is what we know to be true the truth and, just why is our reality our reality. And so, but I always assumed that, a lot of the things that I didn't understand as a kid that they were answers to, but I was just too young to understand them. And I always assumed when I was a child that adults had it figured out. Adults knew everything. Adults have the answers. And so we were, on a plan, on a path to success and growth of the human race because adults knew exactly what they were doing. But, I the older I get, I'm starting to realize adults don't know shit. Adults don't know. They know things, but they don't know as much as you think that they know when you're a kid. You think they know everything, but then the older you get, you start to realize that some of these adults are stupid. And there's actually a lot that we don't know about the world that we live in and things that we take for granted that for me, I'm like, wait a minute, how am I supposed to focus on anything related to the future when I still have so many unanswered questions about shit that's occurred in the past? Hello, but let's get into it. So what am I talking about? I feel like, we live in a world where we have a lot of really strong guesses and we call them theories and it's assumptions that we have of the world. And so far, a lot of them have held up. A lot of them keep us alive. A lot of these theories have allowed us to launch rockets and satellites into space. We have been able to, cure diseases. We have been able to do some really cool shit. But still, a lot of it at the end of the day is assumptions that we humans have about the world. And whether or not they're true or not is irrelevant other than these are the rules that we assume are correct as to explain the reality that we occupy. But at the end of the day, we don't really know if that's the right answer because it's not like God's gonna just show up one day and be like, you know what, scientists, physicists, religion, people, this is really what's right and wrong. We ultimately as humans are being the judge of what parts of our information are true and how it influences the way that we live every day. But I feel like we live in a world we don't understand and we are destroying it before we've even had a chance to. How we treat the world, essentially even how we treat each other. There's so much great things humans do. We do build awesome stuff, but in the process of building all this awesome stuff, we destroy a lot of things. We make a ton of mess, a ridiculous amount of mess to the point where our garbage, we're trying to recycle into new material because we've just created so much garbage. We have islands of garbage. It's insane. How much crap we produce every year. And we do this at a rate that is so mind-bogglingly fast that we are destroying ecosystems and not even really caring about it because, I got the new matcha from Starbucks, so what does it matter if the chimpanzees are running out of forest because we need palm oil to create all the syrups and shit that we consume, in Nutella. And, it's crazy because there's so much of the world we haven't discovered yet. There's species out there that we don't even know of that still exist and occupy this planet, but we don't even know that they exist. And we probably will never know that they exist because we continue to destroy and pollute our environment at a rate that, again, mind-bogglingly fast. A lot of the things that we hold to be true are based on our senses and how we, again, occupy the world. And if our senses were to be different, the way that we would perceive and therefore engage with the world would be different. And when I say that, I want you to really think about it because how we perceive the world, again, is not an accurate representation of how the world actually works. We move through a world made up of solid things that are in fact not solid at all. And if you study physics or if I don't know if science was your thing in school and you're probably like, this shit is boring, when will I ever apply it to life? But physics explains why you and I exist fundamentally and why you can even hear what I'm saying right now. This idea that we are made up of really small things called atoms. Some say, it goes as even further as quarks, but a lot of these atoms are made up of subatomic particles that are more space than matter. So if you are made up of stuff that's more space than matter, but that stuff makes up the compounds that make up the tissues that make up the organ systems in your body, what does that mean if the majority of the stuff that makes you who you are is space and not actually matter? And what does that mean for your ability to be a conscious thing that, again, can interpret what I am saying right now and have its own opinions and feelings about what it's hearing through whatever, technology that you're streaming this podcast on? Like, it's absolutely insane. And even though we are made up of more space than matter, we're still able to move through this world. We obviously don't walk through walls. We obviously, if I punch you, you will feel it. It's not like I'm just going to go through you. And so it's interesting how something that is not solid at all still occupies space in this world. And for me, that's really, really interesting, because what does that mean if you're sick? If you're just, a vibrating mush of particles, how does a vibrating mush of particles get sick? You know what I mean? Like, how does that even work? Even though from a biological perspective, we understand that there are things like pathogens and viruses that can affect the body. If those things too are nothing but vibrating particles, and those vibrating particles are meshing with my vibrating particles and are creating a different response in my vibrating particles, like, it's just interesting to how do we don't look at the world that way when we move through it. We actually ignore a lot of that, and we move through it in this classical Newtonian way, which has worked out, again, really well. We can launch spaceships, we can do all sorts of cool things, but at the end of the day, like, how we perceive the world is, again, not how the world actually is. But a lot of the decisions that we make every day ignores that fact, when I think it's stuff that we should be thinking about, because, like, it explains, again, how we get here. And I think, like, how are we supposed to move forward in the world when we don't even really understand how we exist in the first place? But anyway, and when I talk about these ideas of, like, you being a subatomic mass of vibrating particles, and you're like, Harsha, what does that even mean? Like, how am I supposed to? I obviously don't feel that way, but I'm curious to have this experiment that you can try at home or right now or whatever it is that you're doing. But I want you to try and actually feel a part of your body, whether that be your hand, your ear, your toe, whatever it may be. If you actually try for a second, or maybe longer than a second, let's say like a minute, 5 minutes, to try and feel an actual part of the body, what does that feel like? Like, what does it feel like to have a hand? And for me, when I try this and I try to sense my hand, what I feel is usually an energetic void. And it doesn't really feel like anything. It kind of feels just like a tingly pressure. But I know if I slam that tingly pressure in a door, I'm going to scream. And that's kind of cool and weird and interesting. Everyone in the world, everyone that you know, perceives the world differently from you. Everyone that you've met has a completely different idea of who you are in their head. My reference for the color red is likely different from yours. What I taste, what my threshold for sweet is likely different from yours. And so a lot of the decisions that we make on the daily basis, like what to eat, how to drive, and what we pay attention to, is largely driven by our senses, which each have different frames of references for each person. That is largely based on where you grew up, who your teachers were, how you were educated, the environment that you were in, and the types of experiences that you experienced in your life. How has our ability, growing up with a sun influenced our perception of light and how we perceive the things that give us energy and nutrients? We are brought to you by Empower You. Applying for college or moving abroad to the US, Canada, or the Netherlands? Not sure what school offers financial aid to Caribbean students? Looking for scholarship resources or just someone to talk to about the experience and get guidance? Check out Empower You. It's a nonprofit founded by yours truly with the values to empower, educate, and expand the opportunities for young Caribbean and minority students. Empower You offers college fact sheets, college application and resume proofreading and editing services, mentorship, and help with college applications or just figuring life out after high school. They secretly offer tutoring services too, but I didn't say that. All of their main services are free. For more information or if you're interested in donating to this fabulous organization, check out their website at empoweryou.online. That's empower you with the letter U, not the word, .online. Would the way that we engage with the world be different if our senses were different? And I think the answer to that is yes. If I were blind, I obviously would engage with the world differently. If I was deaf, I probably would engage with the world differently. But if I was an entirely different being, like a bat, I'm sure for a fact my experience of reality would be entirely different, and therefore the way that I would engage with the world would be entirely different. And I sometimes, I think about this because I think, I always feel bad when I see animals get run over on the highway here in the United States. Like that's like anytime I see roadkill, I swear I pray for that animal. Like I feel so bad because to me, again, like the world that we live in was built, we changed it to suit our needs, forgetting that this is not a world that is just our own. And in fact that we share it with many other creatures, but we seem to forget that because we put our priorities over theirs, which I understand. I mean, it makes sense. Like, why would we not do what humans need? But I sometimes think about how these other animals are engaging in a world that because their senses are different, they don't necessarily see our roads as roads. They see them as obstacles from getting one side of the forest to another. And it's just interesting because I wonder if we have this ability to be conscious and think about things from different perspectives, should we not be ethically responsible for making sure that we then represent creatures that we share this planet with, but we know obviously can't speak to us about their needs, but we are rational enough to be able to deduce their needs. And I the whole point of this is really because I spend a lot of time thinking about the things that we do. And speaking of animals, one thing that I think this is interesting to me is animals don't really shower the way that humans do. And don't get me wrong, showers are great, and I definitely think people should shower. I'm definitely not a fan of body odor, but I think it's interesting where this idea of using soap and water to cleanse the skin came from. And obviously, humans weren't born with soap. We invented it, and science has proven the efficacy of soap for public health and sanitation. But sometimes I think what if soap was a good invention, but not the best invention for when it comes to sanitation and just cleaning the body? Because again, I feel like we were born into this world naked and alone, and so obviously we use our brain and creativity to create all of these cool tools to help make life easier for ourselves, because I'm sure being in negative 60-degree weather butt-ass naked is not a great feeling. And so we created clothes to protect our skin, which was super fragile because we didn't grow fur on the rest of our body to the same extent that other mammals do. But I sometimes, again, wonder, what if we should be using something that's even better than soap to cleanse the body? And, I came across one of my friends, Kemi, it showed me this inventor from the University of Michigan and is currently working on, I guess, launching this small business around utilizing light as a way of medicine or just as a way of cleansing the body. And it's specifically, I believe it's the usage of red light. I'm not too well read in how red light kills bacteria or can improve sanitation, but from what I have seen thus far, it seems to have some sort of impact. And I know people use red light for skin therapy and stuff like that. But it's interesting to me just because it's light is something that's been around us since the day we've been born, even before humans evolved. on planet Earth. Light has definitely been a huge influential factor on the environment that the Earth created. And so why don't we, in science and medicine, look at light as a tool to actually help improve the quality of life for people? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one that if you go out in the sun, after a gray, dreary day, it definitely has an impact on my mood. It definitely makes me feel better, makes me feel more energetic, just more engaged and happy. And again, like, we don't really talk a lot about other ways of doing things. And I think science is one of those things that is about the progress of society, and technology and engineering has definitely been pushing things forward. But again, I think it's important for us to question why we do the things that we do, because sometimes the way that we do them may not necessarily be what's best for society or what's best for just humanity or for the planet. And if we, instead of just accepting the status quo, which I feel like it's easy to do, especially given how large our civilization, our species is. But I think for us to continue to make the world a better place, we have to question the decisions that we just take for granted, or the ideas that influence our lives that we just take for granted. And understanding, like, maybe this isn't where we should stop. Maybe we should keep going. Maybe there are other alternatives that we have never considered that would be much better at creating a better life for everyone. And that's the whole goal. That's why we work together in a civilization, is because it's better as a group than being alone. Okay. But yeah, like, clearly we make decisions that are not in what's best for humanity. Like, guns is a perfect example of that. We made them, at a time where for some reason or another, humans felt like we needed to kill each other over land. Like, I understand land is a limited resource and all, but it's just interesting to me where, like, how humans just were so territorial to the point where we were willing to kill each other. And I do understand there is some evolutionary biology and psychology that does tie into that, which is related to the in-group versus out-group. And where, like, you're more likely to protect people in your tribe than people in another tribe. And that's why tribes are very dangerous to the growth of communities and society. But back to guns. Guns were clearly not a good idea, but yet we continue to make them. And the reason why, I feel like, is because money has been a great motivator in propelling society forward. But money is not always perfect, because I feel like money sometimes corrupts the systems that's meant to serve people. In the example of guns is not something that necessarily serves people. It serves the idea that there is an external threat, that you need to protect your family, that you need to protect your community, you need to protect your country. But why are we it's like 2021. Like, why are we living in a world where we feel like our neighbors are a threat to us? Like, you would think, having had so much time on this planet, like, we would have recognized that we're a lot more similar than we are different. As much as humans disagree on a lot of things, from religion to, should you get vaccinated or not, or like how you should spend your money, at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all just trying to create a better life for our families. We're all just trying to be happy. And I think it's important for us to remember that we are more alike than different. And this whole idea of separateness, that, different nationalities, even different races, to me is really toxic, because it breeds the idea of tribalism from the beginning. If you have a country that you are patriotic to, like, the people in that country, whether or not you know them all, they become your tribe, and naturally people want to support their tribe, even though the whole tribe thing is, like, silly to me, at least. Anyways. But yeah, money for me, I feel like it's a great motivator. It's definitely served society in a lot of really great ways. Because of money, a lot of the things that we have today are driven because of financial decisions. But to me, the issue with money is, again, it has this tendency to corrupt systems meant to serve people. Because if you live in a capitalistic society where, at the end of the day, the number one goal is to really be rich AF, I'm trying not to swear as much, guys, okay? I'm trying. If you're in a capitalistic society where the goal at the end of the day is to be a billionaire, is to be the richest mofo on the streets. You know what I mean? Like, how is that necessarily ever going to be what's best for the majority when one person is always going to have the majority? Yeah. You know? And so it's interesting because it's like, on one level, can you blame someone for just being really good at the game of capitalism? No, I don't think you can. Like, you know, whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's good or bad, like, they're playing the game the way the game was made to be played. And just because they win it, you can't be a hater. But again, how is this a system that's serving people when the whole point of us being a civilization is for all of us to grow and prosper, for all of us to have improved quality of life, for all of us to be moving forward generation from generation? Because if certain groups are not feeling like they're improving their quality of life, then what is the point of playing this game? Why are we, you know, all a part of this society if it doesn't serve everybody? But again, I think that that's a hard thing to do. I don't think any society has ever been perfect. And I will say, like, we should definitely be giving credit where credit is due. And democracy has tried its hardest, and I think it has done a really good job for a while. Whether or not is it the system that will continue to take us where we need to go, I don't know. But I do think that that's something that we should be talking about. Because to me, it seems like democracy has kind of been bought and sold because of how influential money has been in the game of politics. And frankly, money really is what decides what vaccines and medicines get made, no matter how valuable they are to society. Money decides what movies get made, what products get made, what policies are enforced, what clothes come out next season, what schools have the best programs, what research gets funded, regardless of the harm or benefit it provides to society. Obviously, you would think, right, like, having more money would always be what's best. But again, for example, Ebola was a very lethal freaking disease, okay? And to this day, we still don't have a vaccine for Ebola, but we have one for COVID. But the difference between COVID and Ebola was at least controlled to mostly African nations, and it didn't affect the rest of the world. COVID touched everyone's land. And so there was more, you could say, of a vested interest in creating a vaccine for COVID. But I will say it also probably had a better price tag too. Because imagine only a couple 100,000, maybe a couple million people getting the Ebola vaccine versus billions of people getting the COVID vaccine. That is an extra zero, but I'm telling you, that comes with a lot of moolah, okay? And so again, like, money, I feel like, can be toxic because people will sacrifice their health, relationships, their well-being, even their morals just to attain it. And for me, is money the right thing to even drive progress if it ignores the destruction of the only planet we have? Like, how good is money as a motivator if it's creating unsustainable practices that, frankly, again, are unsustainable? We cannot sustain living this way. If we continue to do it this way, what will happen will be guaranteed misery and suffering for masses and masses of people. And I know we can ignore that right now because we can pretend like life is Gucci because war is not on our side of the planet. But there are people out there that are currently experiencing what it's like to live in some shit ass situations like starvation, war-torn nations, freaking being like put in prison over your religion. And yet, again, like, we continue to truck forward when there are warning signs. People have been losing property to natural disasters. We have seen the warning signs of climate change, and just like how our mass growth in population is actually, if we do not do this properly, if we do not continue to maintain our infrastructure, puts the entire species at risk. And I know, like, people are like, oh, haha, like, humans will come out at the other end. Nah, you know what will come out at the other end? Cockroaches. Them bitches freaking will survive an atomic bomb. We will be crisp bacon just crumbling into the soil, okay? Do we really think that money is the best motivator for humans? Like, because I do agree, okay, money makes sense because before we had the whole bartering system and like, exchanging services is cool and all, but it's not very effective if like I built you a computer, but then you like paint my nails. It's not really a fair trade. You know what I mean? And so money was a great way of tying a monetary value to a service or a product where that the vehicle in which you were exchanging, which is money, could be applied to, diamonds, a service. It didn't really matter. But you knew it was like a common currency from which to do business. And that's why money exists. And it made sense. And I feel like that's why it makes sense why Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies could replace conventional dollars if we chose to go that way. But again, like my thing is, do people really need money to be the thing that motivates them to do work? Is like the thing that gets people to be productive money? Or would people be productive without money? And in fact, people naturally want to create things. I am of the belief that people are naturally interested in creating things. I think it's in our nature to be creators of our own tools and toys. We've been doing it for decades. We do it without even realizing that we're doing it. I think that's just how we operate. And so sometimes I wonder, how would you then replace a society that is based on money and having value based on productivity? How do you replace that? How do you make a society where money is not the center? Because currently, again, the way that we distribute resources, the way that we prioritize all of the tasks that humans could be doing with their time is based on money, which is pretty much based on how can we make more money? That's where we put our money. So how do you replace a society where all of its resources is based on money? How do you decide who gets how much land and for at what value point, and if they deserve that land, if you don't have any way of creating sort of like a common denominator to determine whether or not that individual worked hard enough to deserve that piece of land? It's easy with money because you just buy it. So no one can tell you, hey, do you deserve that mansion? Well, I bought it. You know what I mean? But then if we take that away, what do? How do you decide who gets what and how much of what? And I think like sometimes I understand capitalism is not a perfect system in any shape, way, or form. But again, it's important for us to improve on what we have. We don't necessarily need to scrap it, but I see the temptation to scrap it, because again, money is so deeply rooted in the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we think about each other, the way that we think about communities and countries, and which countries get to grow and which don't is largely dependent on money. I mean, if you look at my home country right now, they're all crying because of how broke they are. But again, money, for some people, they use it as a vehicle of power and control over others. And that dictates a lot of the well-being of communities. And is that the right thing to do? I don't know. But I think it's important that we talk about it and understand why, again, or do we live the way that we live? Because again, if we live in a system that's not serving people, eventually, I mean, are we just going to accept that? Like where do we eventually decide like we want better for ourselves and for our future and just for our entire species, because I personally want a world in which everyone has the ability to progress and to grow and to harness skills and to contribute to society. I think the whole point of living is really to be of service and to help just your fellow man, help your fellow gal, your neighbor, like make life better by being just a good, kind person. But here's another thought for you. Humans have no idea where humans came from. And you're probably like, evolution, duh. And it's like, okay, this is true. Evolution is our best theory right now as to where humans came from. And it paints this idea that, we evolved from primates, not necessarily that we were chimps and gorillas, but that our ancestors may have originated from that tree. And so over time, we had other variants of Homo sapiens. One of them was, the Neanderthals and and those folks, Lucy, all them peeps, but again, there's still a lot of gaps in the story as to how humans came to be and why we are the only ones of our kind. But again, there's still a lot we don't really know. And I mean, I believe in evolution. If you asked me, Harsha, how did humans get here? I'd probably say evolution is our best guess. But again, there's still so much we don't know. And I'll tell you in a perfect example. We still don't know, or at least I have not heard the answer to what happened to the Mayans or the Olmecs. They just vanished off of the face of the earth. I think the best guess that I recall was that the Mayans vanished because they just destroyed their ecosystem so much that like a lot of their land eroded, and so they had to move. But nobody told me where they moved to. And again, with the Olmecs, they're even older than the Mayans, and they really just disappeared. And they built those gigantic sculptures that, again, nobody can explain how the hell humans did that. Like, absolutely no understanding of how they did that. And to make matters worse, so when I was in school, I was taught that human civilization, so that's the development of complex life into like urban areas and settlements, began roughly like 3000 to 4000 BCE, right? But in fact, recently, and when I say recently, I don't know when they actually discovered this. Oh, I have it right here. They discovered it in 1963, but they discovered this archaeological site in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. I feel like I'm saying that weird, but Göbekli Tepe essentially was discovered in 1963, and it is one of the, in fact, probably the oldest archaeological site that we know of that displays complex civilizations. And when this thing was dated, mind you, it was dated to 9000 BCE, okay? That's 6,000 years before we were taught humans were able to create complex civilizations. So you're telling me for 6,000 years, mind you, think about that, 6,000 years, okay? And we had complex civilizations on planet Earth 6,000 years before we thought humans were capable of developing civilizations. And mind you, at this archaeological site, there are etchings on some pillars that show this like figure holding like a purse on a serpent, and that same symbol has been found at archaeological sites all across the world. Explain it to me, because somebody has not. I need answers. And then on top of that, okay, I'm just gonna throw out this other historical thing that you guys should know, because I think that it's really sus and I need answers. Okay, so there was this lovely human being, R.I.P., because he's not with us anymore, but Lord knows if I could have met him, it would have been everything. But his name is John Anthony West. He did a lot of work with like ancient Egyptian civilizations and like archaeological sites and just like events around archaeology in ancient Egypt. And he, along with a geologist, I believe, were actually able to determine that the Sphinx that we were taught, again, was built during the time of the Great Pyramids is actually way older than what we thought it was. And that is due to, they were able to detect erosion on the body of the Sphinx that dates back to a time when Egypt flooded. Now, if you are like me, Egypt, we're taught, has been a desert forever. Like literally forever. Like forever and ever and ever. So pretty much when Egypt flooded was so long ago. And I apologize that I don't actually know the numbers for this one, but it was so long ago that they're like, this is impossible, because then who the hell built the Sphinx? Because literally they didn't even think that there were people in Egypt when Egypt was flooding, nevertheless building this freaking Sphinx. back then, and yet it happened. So again, answers, I need them. Somebody please email me or something, DM me. I need to know, because as a human, how are we supposed to figure out what humans should be doing with their time and with their life if we don't even understand our own backstory? Because again, humans are just like the weirdest animal to exist on this planet. And yet, again, we have this consciousness that we can't explain. And we have this history that is so long that we don't even know. And yet we're still trying to make decisions on the future and what we should be doing, when it's like, what if our whole idea of humanity and what humans were is completely wrong? You know, when I was in college, I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of different faculty, and during one of my conversations with a great biophysics lecturer at Michigan, and we were talking about his research in Alzheimer's. And what's interesting to me was he was pretty much saying, despite all the years of research that has been going into Alzheimer's and different mental illnesses, we still, to this day, do not know the cause of Alzheimer's, even though this is one of the most common mental illnesses that, older people can develop over their lifetime. And it's just absolutely insane, because it's like, we've been doing so much work to try to understand humanity, understand how our brain works and how we decay and die and the things that go wrong in our body. But yet we have made we've made progress, but to think about how much we don't know about ourselves and about how we get sick and how we lose our minds over time and how age affects our ability to function is absolutely insane. And even better yet, we have no idea what happens to a person in the event of death, what goes through their consciousness, how do they feel physically, and what does that feel like more than anything? What is the feeling associated with that event? We have absolutely no idea. And I think because we have no idea, for so many people, that's a scary thing. I can't even imagine what it would be like to not exist tomorrow. For this to be like my last podcast for whatever reason, like I couldn't even imagine what that would be like. I couldn't even imagine what that, it's just like a wall. There's just I cannot explain that. But even still, like, we have no idea what a baby's experience as they gain consciousness. I have no recollection of what it was like to be a baby. Nevertheless, what it was like to be in my mom's womb, to grow, to manifest myself into existence. I have absolutely no reference, no memory, nothing of what that experience was like. I have no recollection of what it was like to be born. I have no recollection of my first days as a human. And obviously, one could argue like your brain wasn't fully developed, so obviously you maybe don't have the ability to store memories. But again, babies become conscious. And so it's like, at what point then does a baby become conscious? Is it like, are you conscious once you can retain memories, or are you conscious from the moment you're born? Like where does this line get drawn? And we don't understand. Why does the brain do what it does? We can map function to region, but why does the brain invent colors that don't exist? Again, what functional service does that serve us? Is it an evolutionary based thing? Is it just proof that we live in some sort of matrix that makes no sense? Like, how do we know that our understanding of physics is for sure explains everything? Because again, the color pink doesn't exist, but many of us see it every day. And why? Physics cannot explain the color pink. It's not a physical concept, and yet we perceive it in our reality. And it's like, again, humans have so many different states of consciousness. We are happy, we are sad, we feel guilty, we feel anxious, we feel paranoid. We dream, and our dreams feel real. Our dreams can scare us. Why do we force kids to go to school at 8 a.m. when their biological clocks would rather them be asleep at the early hours when they need to wake up to get ready for school at 8 a.m.? Like, it makes no sense. And then we get mad at teenagers for being grumpy. Well, if you were sleep deprived for months on end because you were forced to wake up at 8 a.m., well, at 5 a.m., so you could be in class for your 8 a.m., I mean, wouldn't you be grumpy too? But the difference is adults drink coffee until they just try to make kids feel like shit for feeling how they feel. It's just, I don't know, like I sometimes just wonder, like, why do we have the rules that we have? And a lot of them make sense. Why we created nations was to make it easier for us to understand how much resources we had and how we could distribute resources with other nations, other countries. And the reason we did that because it was easier to manage people that way. I assume, again, that nations were created because it was a lot easier to manage people that way. And then you could create unions, and then these, unions could collaborate across nations to create collective goals that would push humanity forward. But again, are nations the best way to group people, especially in a day and age where we pretty much live in a global village? People travel all the time across countries. Clearly, COVID didn't give a damn what nation you were part of. And so sometimes it's like, are these old ideas of how we group ourselves, how we identify ourselves, does that necessarily best serve the needs of humans in the future? Is gender the best way to divide labor and social responsibilities? I think gender and the way that mainstream media looks at gender, I have a few problems with personally. I don't know if I want to get into it right now, but I'll say you this. This is my take. One, I think we should not be basing labor and social responsibilities based on gender. I think that's really silly. A lot of the social stereotypes that we have around gender, to me, are stupid. Like, straight up dumb, don't make any sense. I don't know why anyone ever thought that we needed to believe this garbage. Like, why? Like, this idea that women need to be soft or that men are hard. Women can't burp, or like women shouldn't swear, or like women can't wear, there was a time where women didn't even wear pants. Like, to me, all of those things just seem silly. Like, when did clothes have gender? To me, if a guy wants to wear a skirt, I mean, you better rock that shit. Like, I really don't care. And I don't know why anybody else cares what people do with their life if it doesn't hurt you or anybody else. But I will say gender is tied to biology, and frankly, you can fight me on that. We should be able to have these conversations in our society if we want us to all be able to move together, to live together, to work together. We don't all have to agree, but we should all be able to talk and still be friends after. Because my ability to connect with other humans is super important. For me to just not engage with people because they don't agree with me that's not how society should work. Cancel culture is dumb. You need to be having conversations with people, okay? You can't just, because they don't agree with you, just don't talk to them ever again. Like, that is how you breed extremism, is you don't allow people to express themselves, and you tell them that their thoughts are stupid, when instead of saying that their ideas are bad and stupid, you should just replace them with a better idea. That's how we grow collectively. Okay. But again, every life is different. Every human wants different things. And, I feel like there's just so much that we can do, because there's a lot that we do share in common. Even though we all want different things, we all want to be able to be safe. We all want to be able to eat good food. We all want to be able to save. We all want to be able to live comfortably. And it's really, really insane to me how that's so hard for us to get there. Why is it so hard for us to get there? I don't understand, especially when it comes to the food thing, because food grows on trees for free. If you just plant the seed, like, food will grow. I'm literally growing an avocado right now. Like, it just takes practice and patience. But again, why do we even waste food in the beginning just to keep prices stable when there's so many people outside starving? Answers. Because again, we all are accepting that. We all accept food getting thrown away because, again, how many of us are aware of how much food gets thrown away every year? How much meat gets thrown away because it's spoiled. All those cows were just killed for you to have that steak, but nobody bought the steak, so now it's spoiled. So that cow's life was worthless. Like, again, why do we waste food at all? And I know there are countries that have passed policies to disincentivize wasting food. I believe this was like in France. But again, why is it something that needs to take so much time? Like, it seems so obvious as to why we shouldn't be wasting food, especially again when there's such a mass population of fellow humans that are starving. And frankly, I hate when like food in my fridge spoils. It makes me really upset because I know how privileged I am to even have food in my fridge, and knowing that there's people out there that don't even have that luxury. We have to think about the actions that we each do every day, because again, what we accept as the norm allows these things to happen. And I know it's not perfect, because a lot of these things that we have created to create the world and make it better have had blowbacks. No great idea is perfect. But I think it's important for us to have conversations that challenge what we expect to be normal, what we accept, so that we can continue to grow. And that's like the whole point, is for us to continue to grow. I want the best for us. Like, I want us to be awesome and like to be living in a civilization that we're proud of, and if we don't have these kinds of conversations, like, how are we going to get there? And I know I talk like I'm talking to you right now, like we were in the same room, and I don't know, maybe you have opinions about the stuff that I said, but if you do, please share them with me. If you're interested in how you can share your perspectives with me, go to the website for this podcast. You can go to my website, which is harshaparchani.com/podcast, and that will take you to my podcast page. And there you can actually leave me a voice message for this episode where you can share your thoughts. You can share your opinions. You can tell me I'm an idiot. I don't know. Like, share whatever it is that you want to share. The whole point of my podcast is for it to be a conversation, not just between me and the mic, but hopefully with you all that listen to my episodes every time they come out. And it means a lot to me, and I appreciate you listening and being there. But yeah, if you want to engage with me, definitely reach out. I would love to hear what my fellow humans think and what thoughts they would like to see or questions they have about our society, because I think it's important for us to have these conversations, because how do we expect to grow and plan for the future if we don't even know what we all think? So thanks again for listening to this episode of the Chattabox. I hope to see you again next time. Follow us on Instagram at @the.chattabox.